Hey comrades, what's up? So, we're going to continue our X-Men journey in what I like to call the Mimic Saga, because Mimic's back, and he plays like a pivotal role. What the heck is wrong with my car? I'm leaving work right now, sorry. I'm going to like crash into somebody here if I'm not careful. I parked in a muddy patch. Alright, I think I'm good. Alright, so the Mimic's back, Cal Rankin. So this issue's the first issue in this series, in this arc as I like to call it. He is, we get the Mimic fighting the remaining X-Men. If you remember, Angel got his wing shot up by Cyclops while they were fighting El Tigre. We also had the Fantastic Four series or issue between El Tigre and this. Not timeline-wise, in release date, which is kind of the order I'm reading these things in, but it clearly took place like prior to Angel being hurt because he was there fighting with them. And we also meet the Puppet Master there. So if you listened to my last video, at the very end we talked about the issue with the Fantastic Four, and the Puppet Master learned about Xavier and made a puppet to like control him, and then him and the Thinker, I think, they like pieced the fuck out. So in this issue, we start with the Mimic fighting the X-Men, but it's like a play fight just to see how powerful he is, and then we go back in time and we see Angel's pretty beat up, but if he rests his wing and takes care of himself, he should be able to fly again. And Angel he's like, hey man, sorry, I was like delusional, I didn't mean to like say you were the asshole who did this on purpose, Scott. And Scott just feels so guilty and sad about it, and Hank and Iceman are like, they're like, oh no, our leader's in danger, let's go out with our girlfriends. And like, yeah, let's do it. So they do. They go out with Zelda and Vera, and they have a good time. They're having hot dogs and stuff. And then there's like a bank robbery, so like, hey, let's turn into our X-Men guys and go take care of that. And Vera's like, Hank, where are you always going? You're always like popping off doing weird shit. And he's like, oh, bullshit. And she's like, whatever, I don't care about your bullshit. Just be safe. And Hank's like, Roger, Dodger. So they go, but Spider-Man's already got it. And then Professor X is like, hey, ask Spider-Man if he wants to join the X-Men. Why would we do that? Professor X is super concerned that there's only like 3 workable X-Men at this point because Jean's off to college and Angel is, what the fuck is going on here and why is this like this? Oh, they're good, they're moving. So he also astral projects out to wherever Quicksilver and the Scarlet Witch are to ask them if they want to join, but they announce that they've already joined the Avengers. So you're getting a lot of like, what's it called? Cameo? Yeah, get a lot of cameos in this one. So anyway, at this point, they go pick up Jean for like the weekend party town, and Cal Raskin, who was in another chemical like laboratory explosion, is like, I remember who I am. He's like, hey, I'm back. And they're like, oh, hey, what's up, man? And he's like, hey, I want to come join you. And Professor X is like, yeah, okay, sure. So they take him back, and then Professor X has like a conversation with him and Scott. Oh, they also try to recruit Johnny Storm, even though he's part of the Fantastic Four. That's off screen, so we don't see him in this issue. But they get back, and then Professor X and Cal and Cyclops have decided that Cal Rankin is the Mimic, that he's going to join and he's going to be the leader. And he's like, yeah. But right around this time, at some point, the Puppet Master tries to make another puppet Xavier and use it, but Professor Xavier has like built defenses up for that, and it shatters in his hands, and he's also had problems about that. But then he's watching like the X-Men interact with Mimic somehow. And so he's like, I'll make a puppet of him. So he does, and he takes control of him, and then there's like some shenanigans, and he takes off, and then Professor X is like, oh good, you guys pretended to lose on purpose so that he would leave, and then we could go track down the Puppet Master again. So they go track down the Puppet Master, and then they fight the Defender, which if you've seen the first Thor movie, it's that, only not as cool in the comics. It's not like a big metal thing, it's like a gooey, almost like the Batman villain Putty Face or whatever. Put Face? I don't remember. I don't read Batman comics, I just saw the cartoon. Putty. Mr. Putty? I don't remember. Anyway, so he's like that, but then they just blow a hole in the floor and he collapses down there, and then they go to fight the Puppet Master, and Mimic's there, and he's like, haha, I'm going to stop you, and Mimic's like having problems. He's like, wait, why am I fighting these guys? Like, I really don't have any beef with them besides the fact that they like beat me up once and took my memory, but that's because I was an asshole. So Mimic's having like quite the arc here on his own in this issue. Meanwhile, Angel had like gotten in a car, driven after everybody, because he uses like the tracking device in the Batcopter, the X-Men copter. And he stumbles in to the room, sees the Puppet Master, runs, grabs the puppet, smashes it, so Mimic gains his powers back, and then Puppet Master like adios is out of there. Now Cal Rankin is like really sad. He's like, Angel saved me, and I'm so tired of people just taking advantage of me, and that I can never be anything without stealing the people's powers, and yada, yada, yada. And Angel's like unconscious, but he'll be okay. We know he flies a lot. He flies a lot more. So eventually we can. So that's that first issue. Hey, what's up, comrades? So the next issue of the Mimic arc, because Mimic is now part of the X-Men, which is why I'm calling it that, involves another famous X-Men character that was unceremoniously killed recently. That is the Banshee. Ooh, the first issue with the Banshee. So the Banshee, who's the Banshee? Banshee is, fuck. Sorry, I'm just getting out of work, so my brain is like done. His name, it's something super Irishy. Connor? I don't remember. Anyway, the name's not in this issue. They just call him the Banshee. So the Banshee's power is like supersonic screeching, which allows him to create barriers and to fly and to do like attacks. He's pretty rad. He's like a cool dude with a good character. He ends up hooking up with Moira McTaggart later on, who is like a geneticist studying mutants. And then I think in some of the more crazy recent storylines, she's a mutant for some reason, if I remember correctly. Anyway, I don't know. Moira. Connor? Is he Connor? Brian? It's something super Irishy. Anyway, so the Banshee and another character named Ogre, who is not a mutant, specifically, he says that because it's important, because Mimic copies powers, right? Mutant powers. Not mutant powers specifically, but just powers. So he can absorb the Banshee's powers, but Ogre's like, I don't have to worry about him because I'm not a mutant. So that's very specific. So Professor X is working on getting Mimic to like be a better leader and to help out the X-Men and not be such a douche nozzle, which he kind of is still a douche nozzle. And he's doing okay, but they're like practicing and they're doing stuff. Angel's still injured and Jean's still at school. Jean has a little conversation with like the guy she's hanging out with there, whether, I don't know if that's like supposed to be her boyfriend or whatnot, but he hints at like having some problems with like a brother who's always overshadowing, like a younger brother, I think, who's overshadowing him and doing all this stuff, and he's kind of sadipotamos about that. And Jean's like, oh, sweetie, don't worry about it as much and stuff. Then, all right, so the professor is like, and then we see the Banshee doing some fun stuff. He's like, he goes into like an art museum and steals like a painting of like a Gaelic countryside, like an Irish Gaelic countryside, and then he goes and steals like some tobacco, some fancy tobacco, and almost gets caught in like a trap by like a deaf janitor, because remember his power is like supersonic hearing and stuff, so if like you can't hear, he can't like affect you as much, even though they talk about vibrations and stuff. I don't know, it's not consistent. It's Stanley, but and then like it's time to fight the X-Men, and we see some Ogre and Banshee interaction. They're talking about, I think it's called the Third Faction, and how they're like the leaders, and how Ogre is like, you're going to disappoint the Third Faction, you're going to be in a lot of trouble, and Banshee's like, yeah, whatever, fella. So then Banshee rides into the X-Mansion, even after all their preparations, and just beats everybody up, and then he leaves, and Ogre comes in with like his gadgets. He's like an Iron Man type character, I guess. And he steals Professor X, but then the X-Men, because they had some preparation, were able to like recover their senses fast and come out and fight. And Jean also shows up at some point to trip the Ogre, and then the Banshee comes back and like knocks guys again, hits him again, and the Mimic's kind of like, oh, if this guy just stuck around for like a minute, I'd get his powers. And then Ogre's like, hey, you gotta be careful, because if Mimic gets your powers, he'll be immune to your powers. So then Ogre and Banshee meet back up at like, Ogre's like, I don't even know, like drill pod machine thingy that they travel around in. And they're giving each other a hard time, like, you failed, no, you failed, no, you failed. All right, let's go get him. And so Banshee goes back, but this time the X-Men are like super ready, because obviously the Ogre has some sort of device that allows him, or some sort of covering, so he's not affected by the Banshee's wail as much. And so Professor Xavier's able to like scan his mind and get the information. So he gives everybody that, so they'll be immune. And then they create like the perfect trap for Banshee. And they capture him, and they put him in like a sensory deprivation chamber, essentially, where he can't like vibrate his way out and affect like air molecules, but he can still breathe just enough so he doesn't die. And then Ogre sneaks in Or then Mimic gets sent out to track down Ogre and figure out what's going on there, and then Ogre comes in to kill he knocks everybody out with some gas or something, and then he goes to kill the Banshee, right? But Cyclops is there. He destroys his gun. He takes off. The Mimic and him start fighting, and now the Mimic has Banshee's powers and on top of everyone else's powers, so he's able to subdue the Ogre pretty easily. And then Professor X releases Banshee and takes off like his headdress that he was wearing, and he's like, "Oh, thank you. I was being dominated by the Ogre, by the third faction, because if I didn't do what he said, he'd like blow my brains out and kill me or something." And I was like, "Why was he trying to shoot you then?" Inconsistency. Anyway, and then Banshee gives like a very dire warning about the third faction and how they have the power to destroy the world. Oh no! And that's the end of that issue. So the last issue of the Mimic trilogy, we get the X-Men. It's a snow day, and they're out skating and scooting around. Angel's back to good health, so he's back doing fun stuff. And he's back to flirting with Jean. And Scott's back to having, I don't know if it's an existential crisis. He's just back to being mopey Scott Summers. Oh, mopey Scott Summers. You're the worst. So, old mopey Scott Summers. Everyone's having a good time and joking around and doing everything. And Cal, who is the Mimic, he has to go off because Professor X wants to do some training with him. So he's like, "All right, kiddos, have fun." He even brought his ice skates, poor guy. So then Scott goes off and he has a moment of sadness. He shoots his laser beams and shoots him again and tries to control him. He's like, "Why?" And then he creates a rock slide. And he's able to escape, and he's like, "All right, no harm, no foul." But there was some harm. So deep inside this hill, right by their mansion, apparently the Super Adaptoid, who's an Avengers villain who kind of absorbed all the powers of the Avengers. Let me see if I can remember right. It's Wasp, Captain America, Hawkeye, and I think Iron Man. And maybe Ant-Man. I can't remember. It's been a while since I read about the Super Adaptoid, so I totally forgot about him. Anyway, so he's like, "Oh, humans, something, I better go see what's going on just in case." And so he heads up, and everyone's gone to the danger room, or Scott's wandered off to be sad. But Beast, Angel, and Jean have gone off to the danger room. And Bobby's like, "I'm going to transform into my Iceman form, and I'm going to skate around and be awesome." Because he was, flopping around. Everyone was having a hard time being on skates, except for Warren and Jeannie. So he turns into Iceman. He's skating around. The Adaptoid's watching him. He's like, "Hey, you, Ice Boy." And then Bobby, who's supposed to be 16, I think, he freaks out and he's like, "Ah!" And he hits him with ice and runs away. He's like, "All right, I'll tell everybody about it." And then Super Adaptoid's like, "I'm going to follow and watch." So he does. So then everyone's in the danger room area, about to do danger room stuff, and Iceman comes charging in. He's like, "Oh, there's a 10-foot tall robot, something, something," and no one believes him. And then Scott comes by and he's like, "Hey, lift your clothes by the pool, or by the lake, you dummy." And he's like, "Scott, you believe me? There's a big robot." And he's like, No, I don't." But instead of doing danger room stuff, I think maybe they do danger room stuff, but then they head out and they see Professor X working with Cal, doing Mimic stuff, and he's being arrogant and talking trash and talking about joining the evil mutants because, what have humans ever done for him? And then finally Professor X has, had enough of his bullshit, and he's like, "I'm going to expel you from this school, and you're done." And Cal's like, "Whatever, I'll pack up and be out of here in an hour." So he goes to Mopey Joe, and it's around that time the other X-Men, I'm trying to remember, Professor X go, okay, so it's Factor 3. So it's not Faction 3, it's Factor 3, which is this European thing that they got warned of by the Banshee in the last issue, correct? Which is 2-3 minutes ago. If you're watching this video. For me, it was several days. Anyway, Professor X goes to investigate that further, and it shows him doing chemistry for some reason, but whatever. He's gone. So then the rest of the X-Men get accosted by the Super Adaptoid, who's like, "You must join me. I will turn each one of you into a Super Adaptoid like me, and then you will be my slaves. Hooray!" And so he starts doing it, but they all try to fight him, but then they get knocked out by one of Hawkeye's knockout arrows, because that Adaptoid has all the powers of everybody. Anyway, Mimic sees this and he's like, "Oh, I gotta go stop this." So he goes down there, and then he's talking to this guy, and he's like, "You know what? It doesn't sound so bad to be Super Adaptoid. So yeah, you can transform me." And as he's doing it, Scott musters enough energy to wake up and be like, "No, Cal, he's just using you. He's going to make you a slave." And then Cal's like, "Oh, I feel my will going away. He's right." And so he breaks free and he starts fighting the Super Adaptoid, and he's doing all this stuff. And then he's losing because Super Adaptoid's a machine. And he's getting concerned, but then he has an idea. So he tricks the Super Adaptoid into following up into the air, and then has the Super Adaptoid "All right, go ahead, absorb my powers." What the Super Adaptoid doesn't know is that Mimic doesn't have any powers. He absorbs his powers from everyone else. So it causes like some interference with like the robot Junkins or whatever. And then they both kind of like pass out and fall. They don't pass out. They both fall from the sky, and the Mimic starts losing all his powers, even though the X-Men are right there, and Angel is able to fly up and like gently glide him back down. And the Super Adaptoid loses all his powers too. Oh no! And then he crashes into the water to show up again in future X-Men, in future Avengers related comics. Anyway, and so all the X-Men are like, "Oh no, Cal, you lost all your powers. You can't absorb anyone anymore." And Cal's like, "You know what? That's fine. It took that dumb machine to teach me that I don't need all these powers and I don't need to be such an asshole, because the true power that lies in all of us is friendship." Some bullshit like that. Anyway, that concludes the Mimic arc, and now he's going back to the school probably to hang out, and I can't remember if he comes up again. I don't think Mimic comes up again. I think this really is like the end of the Mimic, but I think he does come up as like a side character. Anyway, so yeah, there you go. Cool. Catch you all later.